In a recent report, the Ukrainian military stated that they destroyed 8 enemy Shahed-136 attack unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, and 5 tactical reconnaissance UAVs in the last 24 hours. During this period, the rocket forces and artillery units struck several key enemy locations, including a command post, a manpower concentration area, 5 artillery pieces at firing positions, a fuel depot, and an electronic warfare station. Unfortunately, the collateral damage from Russian attacks included civilian casualties and destruction or damage to port infrastructure and residential buildings in southern Ukraine. On the battlefield, numerous combat situations took place. In the Lyman sector, the enemy's offensive near Nadia was unsuccessful, and they launched an airstrike near Bilohorivka, Luhansk region. Artillery fire was reported in multiple settlements in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions. In the Bakhmut area and on the Avdiivka axis, Ukrainian defenders successfully repelled enemy attacks, despite heavy fire from enemy aircraft and artillery. The same resilience was seen in the Marinka sector, where Ukrainian forces continue to hold back the Russian advancement. In the Shakhtarska sector, Ukrainian forces managed to liberate the village of Staromayorske, Donetsk region, amid heavy enemy fire. Russian forces failed in their attempts to regain lost positions outside Rivnopil and Makarivka in the Donetsk region. On the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson fronts, Russian forces are primarily focusing on halting the further advancement of Ukrainian troops. Conversely, Ukrainian forces are continuing their offensive operations in the Melitopol and Berdyansk sectors and solidifying their defensive lines. Overall, the Ukrainian forces seem to be maintaining a robust defense while also conducting strategic offensive operations. However, they also warn of a very high likelihood of missile and airstrikes across Ukraine. In the Russian-occupied settlements of the Starobilsk district in the Luhansk region, it's reported that summonses are being issued to all men aged between 18 to 60, regardless of their health status. The summons are purportedly for medical examinations, but there are concerns that these individuals might be forcibly drafted into the conflict, even against their will. The Luhansk Regional Military Administration noted on their Facebook page that nearly every man within the mentioned age range in the settlement of Verkhnya Pokrovka received such summonses. The community is alarmed by the prospect that these examinations could lead to forced mobilization to the front lines, even without explicit consent. Moreover, it is reported that Russian troops continue to send newly mobilized soldiers into combat without any prior military training. The Regional Military Administration indicated that about 110 such soldiers, freshly mobilized and transported from the territory of the Russian Federation, recently arrived at a training camp near Bilolutsk. These individuals were supplied with equipment and informed that they would soon be integrated into assault units and dispatched to combat zones along the contact line. These actions raise serious human rights and international law concerns, especially around the potential use of untrained and possibly unwilling civilians in military operations. According to Oleksandr Syrskyi, the commander of the land forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the enemy is constantly attacking in the Kupiansk and Lyman directions, deploying their most professional units. However, the Ukrainian forces have successfully repelled all attacks in these areas and have managed to maintain their positions. The situation in the Bakhmut direction is reportedly very tense, with Ukrainian forces gradually advancing and reclaiming territories. The enemy is said to be fiercely resisting, conducting intense artillery and mortar attacks. Syrskyi emphasized the crucial role of the group's headquarters in these operations, where officers are constantly analyzing the situation, preparing strategic proposals, and issuing combat orders for the troops. The counter-battery combat is said to be at the forefront of their actions. The aviation units of the defense forces have conducted 7 strikes targeting the concentrations of personnel, weapons, and military equipment of the Russian troops. One of these strikes was aimed at the anti-aircraft missile systems, and another targeted the Russian control center. These operations form a part of Ukraine's counteroffensive strategy to push back the enemy forces and regain control over the contested territories. The White House has reported that Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu visited North Korea, implying that Russia is potentially seeking additional support for their war effort in Ukraine. According to John Kirby, National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications at the White House, Putin is reaching out to various countries for help, and that includes North Korea. Kirby highlighted that North Korea has been providing support to Russia in its conflict with Ukraine, including the supply of weapons such as anti-personnel missiles and shells. North Korean state media confirmed Shoigu's arrival, marking it as the first visit by a Russian defense minister to North Korea since the collapse of the USSR. While the full extent and nature of the discussions during this visit have not been detailed, it underscores the extent to which Russia is seeking international support amid the ongoing conflict and the strict international sanctions it is facing as a result. This could have significant implications for the geopolitical landscape, particularly if it leads to strengthened ties between Russia and North Korea. The Estonian Defense Forces Intelligence Center predicts that Russia will manage to sustain its military operations in Ukraine for a significant period despite heavy human losses. This is due to an anticipated recruitment of about 190,000 additional personnel starting from April 1st, as stated by Colonel Margot Grossberg, the head of the Estonian Defense Forces Intelligence Center. Estonia estimates that Russia has lost between 130,000 and 140,000 military personnel, either due to fatalities or severe injuries during the war in Ukraine. These figures are lower than the UK Ministry of Defence's assessment, which suggests that Russia has incurred 220,000 killed and wounded. Should Russia succeed in recruiting another 190,000 people by the end of the year, it will be able to replenish its losses and continue the war. This also allows Russia's political leadership to avoid formally declaring mobilization, as was done in September of the previous year. Grossberg notes that with these recruitment rates, Russia can maintain the status quo as it has done throughout this year. However, it's important to note that while Russia may be able to replenish its human losses, other factors such as military hardware, economic resources, and international political pressure will also play a significant role in determining the sustainability of the war effort. The Institute for the Study of War, ISWW, suggests that the Kremlin and Russian propaganda outlets have increased their efforts to depict the Ukrainian counteroffensive as unsuccessful. In a recent statement, Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed that Russian troops destroyed 39 out of 50 armored combat vehicles used by Ukrainian forces in intense assaults on the Zaporizhzhia front. He also alleged that Russian forces killed 60% of Ukrainian soldiers involved in these attacks and 40% of the Ukrainian fighter pilots operating in the area. However, ISW believes that Putin is exaggerating the likely losses incurred by Ukraine. These exaggerated claims may be part of a strategic effort to bolster the Kremlin's image as an effective manager of the war effort. By portraying the Ukrainian counteroffensive as a failure, the Kremlin aims to maintain domestic support for the war and undermine international support for Ukraine. It's worth noting that in times of conflict, information from all sides can be manipulated for strategic purposes, and it is essential to verify facts through multiple independent and reliable sources. According to the statements from Vasily Golubev, the governor of Russia's Rostov Oblast, and the Russian Ministry of Defense, Russian air defense forces reportedly intercepted and shot down a missile in the Azov district of Rostov Oblast. A second missile was allegedly intercepted near the city of Azov. These reports claim that the first missile, which Russian authorities believe to have been launched by the Ukrainian armed forces, targeted the center of Taganrog in Rostov Oblast, resulting in a significant explosion and damage to several buildings. The Russian Defense Ministry asserts that their air defense systems intercepted the missile mid-flight, resulting in only debris falling on the territory of Taganrog. It's crucial to note that in times of conflict, reports can often contain conflicting or unverified information. Therefore, these claims should be considered in light of potential bias, and verification from independent sources is highly recommended. Ihor Klimenko, the Ukrainian Minister of Internal Affairs, has stated that territories where the Ukrainian Defense Forces have been conducting offensive actions have been heavily mined by Russian forces. According to him, the longer the Russians occupy a territory, the more densely it becomes mined. Klimenko says that in some areas, there are currently 2 to 4 mines per square meter. This intense mining is slowing the Ukrainian forces' movement as they take necessary precautions to protect their personnel and preserve their military equipment. Klemenko also reported that 130,000 square kilometers of territory have been cleared of mines, and bomb disposal experts have neutralized 665,000 explosives on land and in water. These figures underline the significant challenges posed by landmines in conflict areas, which not only impede military operations, but also pose long-term risks to civilians even after conflicts have ended. Poland is planning to double the size of its armed forces in response to new threats to the country's sovereignty, such as the presence of the Wagner mercenary group in neighboring Belarus, according to Deputy Prime Minister of Poland, Jarosław Kaczyński. This expansion will increase the country's military from 3 divisions to 6, with potential plans for a reserve division in the future. These actions aim to demonstrate that Poland is prepared to repel any provocations or aggressive actions that may pose a threat to its national security. In addition to the military expansion, the government is also bolstering border security by constructing a fence equipped with various types of electronic devices. Poland's Minister of Defense, Mariusz Błaszczak, also confirmed that a number of troops have been transferred to the eastern border. This move reflects the ongoing security concerns in Eastern Europe amid the escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine and the geopolitical implications of this conflict on neighboring countries. Former U.S. national security officials have reportedly been involved in confidential discussions with top Kremlin figures in a bid to find a diplomatic resolution to Russia's war in Ukraine, according to an insider who spoke to the Moscow Times. These discussions, taking place at least twice a month, either virtually or in person in Moscow, are part of an effort to gain a deeper understanding of the Kremlin's perspective and objectives in Ukraine. According to the source, while some Russian elites did not originally support the war and have even deemed it a mistake, accepting defeat is not an option for Russia's leadership. The former U.S. official emphasized the importance of a strong Russia for regional stability and diplomatic opportunities. The U.S. aims to limit the partnership between Russia and China while preventing Russia from amassing power and maintaining U.S. diplomatic outreach in Asia, where Russia is influential. On the issue of Crimea, the source warned that Russia might resort to tactical nuclear weapons if it believed it might lose the region. According to the insider, the U.S. offered to facilitate referendums in Russian-occupied regions on whether to join Russia or Ukraine. But Russia refused and claimed annexation. The source expressed frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin, calling him a significant obstacle to progress. He mentioned that Putin had refused at least one direct conversation with the U.S. administration. The source suggested that reaching out to the Russian elite regarding the potential removal of Putin may become necessary. Alexander Kovalenko, a military and political commentator from the Information Resistance Group, has stated that the third phase of Ukraine's counteroffensive against Russian forces has not yet begun. In the Zaporizhzhia region, the military units in operation are mostly infantry, accounting for 70–80% of combat tasks. This is because it's dangerous to use heavier equipment due to the extensive mining of the area. Manual demining is often required to avoid drawing attention and being targeted by enemy artillery. Kovalenko noted that the start of the next phase of the counteroffensive would be signaled by the engagement of heavy military equipment and the primary strike groups. Currently, in the Zaporizhzhia region, Ukrainian forces are still on the second line of defense and need to strengthen their flanks and capture major strongholds, such as the village of Robotyne. The expert explained that until Ukraine completes the primary line of defense and strengthens all the flanks, discussions about the start of the next phase of the counteroffensive are premature. According to military observer Denis Popovich, the village of Klishivka in the Bakhmut direction holds significant tactical importance for the Ukrainian defense forces. The deoccupation of Klishivka would open new opportunities for the Ukrainian military to encircle Bakhmut. Popovich noted that current military operations are primarily focused on Klishivka. There were reports of partial control over Klishivka by Ukrainian forces, but the enemy has transferred reserves and is making efforts to maintain control over this settlement. The loss of Klishivka would lead to it falling under Ukrainian control, thus allowing Ukrainian forces to manage the retreat of Russian reserves to Bakhmut and continue their successful advancement to encircle the city. The Russian forces are holding their positions tenaciously, transferring reserves without regard to losses in a desperate attempt to keep control of Bakhmut. The loss of Bakhmut would deal a significant blow to the Russian forces. Furthermore, Bakhmut is a strategic location that could allow the Russian army to further advance into the Donetsk region if their offensives in Lyman and Kupiansk directions succeed. However, as of the previous day, none of the Russian offensive attempts have been successful.